On this week's episode, I'm joined by Rory Verrett. Rory is a businessman from the US who recently took a 2-month sabbatical in Portugal. You'll also remember in the last Proud of Portugal episode, we spoke about Rory and how he published a post on LinkedIn titled 5 Things I Learned During a 2-month Sabbatical in Portugal. In this conversation, we explore those 5 things and learn how, for Rory, that visit to Portugal was truly transformative. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. And I'm really honored and excited to be joined here by Rory Verrett. Rory, hi, all the way in America. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Dylan. Thank you for having me on the show.
Awesome. So, Rory, we're gonna put this all into perspective in a little bit, but maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit. Wait, first of all, this is being recorded on Dr. King Day. So happy Dr. King Day. We're going to make it a thing. It's not a thing yet, but we're going to make it a thing. So happy Dr. King Day. But maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. I am from New Orleans, Louisiana. I am 51. I'm married. I have a 14-year-old child, freshman in high school, and I run an executive search firm called Protégé Search, which recruits diverse talent for U.S. and global companies and nonprofits. There are 9 of us in the U.S. that are consultants at the firm, and we represent companies like the New York Times, Peloton, PayPal, Boeing, Hasbro, many leading corporations and nonprofits, and helping them find diverse slates of executive talent.
Amazing. These are big firms.
Yes. Yeah. Very complex clients, and we have been very fortunate that we're very likely the fastest growing firm of our kind in the world.
So, okay. And your football team would be the Saints?
My family does not like the fact that I am not a big Saints fan. I'm actually a bigger basketball fan. So I kind of root for whoever LeBron James plays for. So now the Lakers. I was in LA. I was at a Lakers game and watched the King do his thing.
You can't go wrong if you're rooting for LeBron. You can, if you at the moment, you can go wrong if you're rooting for New Orleans. So I'm going to say to your family, sorry, it's not been a good year. Right. So it hasn't been a good year. You need a new quarterback. That's what they need. Okay.
That is correct.
Cool. Well, let's put this into perspective. We have a repeat series on our podcast called Proud of Portugal. And in the last one that we had, Ricardo Monteiro, who you've actually met in person. Crazy, because I haven't met Ricardo in person. You met him in person, but he read out one of your posts for a reason that he was proud of Portugal that you had published on LinkedIn. And I thought, I've got to speak to Rory. Let's get him on the podcast because it was so beautifully written, and I'd love to dig into your experience. So can I go ahead and read that post, Solon?
Sure.
Cool. Okay. So you took a 2-month sabbatical in Portugal. Actually, maybe we can take a step back before I read it. How did that end up happening that you came here, of all places?
The nature of the work that we do is diversity and inclusion. And in the summer of 2020, with the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and others, there was a great inflection point in American society to really accelerate diversity and inclusion efforts in the social justice sector, with a lot of nonprofits doing work and companies investing in that kind of work, and in the hiring of people of color in corporations. So our phones were ringing off the hook. We had over 140 companies call us to do executive recruiting. And so I was working really, really hard. We had a great year in 2019. So really for about 2.5 years, I was working and our team was working, 12-hour days, both days of the weekend. With COVID, we couldn't really take a vacation, and we had burnout. And I said, I'm going to go somewhere. My family, we're going to go somewhere, and it's going to be a long period of time. I'm going to create this governor where I can't work. right? I'm going to try to go somewhere where it's impossible for me to work or really hard. So I announced to our clients we're going to do a sabbatical. They all approved and appreciated it. And July 1st through August 31st of 2021, my wife, my child, we went to Portugal and stayed in Lisbon.
Okay. Before we started recording, we were talking about some of the other options. How did you guys? I mean, first of all, what did you know about Portugal, and then how did you get to the point of saying, okay, let's go there? What made it? What made that be your destination of choice?
The election of 2020 is an important data point. My wife and I and my child, we all said that if the Democratic candidate lost, if Joe Biden lost, we were going to relocate to another country, that the situation was getting sufficiently toxic from a racial perspective. And we live in the DC area. So the siege of the Capitol, for instance, is local news for us. That is also national news, but it's kind of a local thing. And so we were really thinking, because we can be digital nomads, where would we go if things took a turn for the worse? And we did a global analysis. My wife and I had our own litmus test about weather, cosmopolitan living, inclusiveness, cost and affordability, distance from the East Coast. As I mentioned, we live in the Washington, D.C. area. And we had this entire litmus test, and it came down to about 4 countries: Canada, New Zealand, Uruguay, and Portugal. We've only been to one of those countries, Canada. And so we knew nothing about the other countries. And we started joining Facebook groups. We started reading books about Portugal, watching podcasts. Listening to podcasts, including yours, which I listened to diligently, and watching YouTube videos. I probably bought 15 books about Portugal because I couldn't go anywhere for COVID. I was sitting in this sunroom in my house and read these Portugal books, and started falling in love with Portugal from afar. And we decided, well, Portugal makes sense. New Zealand's too far. Uruguay's kind of far. And we had a friend of a friend, on multiple scenarios that were living in Portugal. So I was like, wow, we actually might know people in Portugal. The one tipping point was I started doing, these Sunday Zoom calls with African-American men who were either interested in moving to Portugal or who already lived in Portugal. We used to call it the Brothers Talk Portugal. And I was like, okay, so I know these guys, and I knew a bunch of women. The woman that runs the Facebook group called Black in Portugal is from New Orleans, my hometown. I was like, all these signals are pointing to Portugal. Let's go to Portugal. And so we decided we're going to go to Portugal, and we're going to do that with a sabbatical that we had planned. So we didn't plan to go to Portugal for 2 months. We planned to go somewhere for 2 months, and Portugal sort of won the sweepstakes of let's do that for 2 months. And so July to August 31st of last year, we went to Portugal.
Did you know anything? Before your research, did you know anything about Portugal?
Nothing, not a thing. I think in my DNA test, I'm 3% from the Iberian Peninsula.
So that's cool.
I didn't really know anybody who had been to Portugal. I had never been to Portugal. I'd never been to Spain. I never had Portuguese food. I never heard of pastel de nata. I didn't know anything about Lisbon. I couldn't tell you one Portuguese political figure or historic figure at all. It might as well have been Paraguay. It might as well have been Turkmenistan. It was as foreign as a foreign country could have been.
Okay. So, that kind of lays a good base for this and what you wrote. You had zero expectations, didn't know what to expect, came completely fresh, not off the boat, but off the plane. And you wrote this really beautiful post about Portugal. So I'm going to read let's just go through. You wrote 5 things that you learned about during a 2-month sabbatical in Portugal. And we'll just go through each step and just sort of thrash it out and how you came to those conclusions. So first thing, 5 things I learned during the 2-month sabbatical in Portugal. Number 1, self-care must become a habit. It was great to slow down and work remotely and on average only an hour a day. But I want to retain how the Portuguese live, which is enjoying just being. It's okay to not be fully scheduled all day. It's okay to not multitask. It's okay to sit at a cafe and watch sailboats go by. That's enough. That's wonderfully enough. How did you get to that? What happened?
So let me just say, the Portuguese are a hardworking kind of community. I don't want to make it seem like this is
Thank you. Yeah, it's true.
A society of loafers that hang around the beach. There is a banking, a business, a medical technology, a tech sector like any other industrialized Western society. But there are some differences, I think, in how the Portuguese people approach work-life balance. And what I enjoyed about it was the fact that you're sitting at a red light in an Uber. The red light turns green. I'm in the back of the Uber. I'm literally psychologically thinking, honk at the guy, honk at her, honk, get them moving. And the Uber in 2 months never honked, never, not once a day. Beep, beep. In DC, New York, that would have happened within you're not moving in 2 seconds, you get honked at. Number two, people were never in a rush with you in commercial establishments, at a coffee shop, at a cafe, at a restaurant, at a retail establishment. There's never like a get in, get out, get in, get out. There's not that kind of rushed mentality. I think number three, literally the way people walk and talk is more measured. So everything starts to slow you down in a bit. There is a stereotype. I don't know if this is necessarily true. I don't really experience it, but that the Portuguese people are not on time, or that is kind of things, dinner at 8, people start at 8:15. I didn't necessarily find that. Maybe 8:05, but nobody showed up at 8:45 saying, hey, I'm here. So you put all that together and you've got a very laid back culture. It's a bit like the American South. It's a bit like the West Coast of the United States. Much of my life has been spent on the East Coast of the United States, kind of go, 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 go. So I really appreciated that very laid back kind of environment, even at a place like Ramiro's, one of my favorite restaurants where I went, where it was, it's busy, it's hustling, it's bustling. I never felt like, okay, finish up your crab. We have 30 customers waiting for this table. I felt like people were patient with you. People were patient with you with my very butchered Portuguese. The one thing I was embarrassed about is I did not invest a lot of time learning Portuguese, but people were just very patient. The culture is patient. And I found that very, very welcoming and beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the traffic lights because my experience, I'm from Johannesburg and we're very aggressive in traffic. And actually in everything really in Johannesburg, it's a very aggressive city for various reasons. But one of the things that surprised me with Lisbon, for example, is they'll hoot sometimes, but it's also because, I don't know if you noticed, the red lights sometimes are above. There's no red light. There's no lights on the side of the pole. So sometimes they'll hoot you just to warn you that the light has changed, and so you can move on. But yeah, this thing of not being rushed is lovely, and just enjoying the moment, just enjoying sitting, having a coffee, just enjoying having that meal and spending an extra 20 minutes or 30 minutes, not having to rush off. I think that's something that they have perfected here.
Yes. And it could be also the topography of Lisbon in particular. You cannot walk that fast because of the hills. So everyone is kind of walking a little bit slower, but there is a strolling element, even on the riverfront, that I had to find myself. My wife and daughter would tell me, Dad, stop walking so fast. But I mean, I spent 4 years working in New York City. I've not gotten out of me the sort of, let's almost a soft sprint in your walk. And it slowed me down. Before I had come to Portugal, I had worked myself to exhaustion during the greatest growth in our firm's brief history. And it was so transformational for me personally to slow down that way.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to number 2 on your 5 things. And this is maybe telling because today's Dr. King Day while we're recording. Number 2, I love not standing out. I did not see one woman clutch her purse or look nervously behind herself when I walked behind them. I felt like a human not a Black man to be feared or mistrusted. I'm sure my American status helped, but in a culture largely free of guns, it was great to be anyone, everyone, and not a threat to public safety by my mere presence. I mean, explain that, how you felt, and why that was so important from you, from your background and coming here, and that experience for you.
That particular element is the element that lingers the longest with me and with my family. And I had a close friend, Jeffrey May, who joined me on the trip as well. He came with his mother and we wound up hanging out for a bit. We've traveled all over the world, my wife and I. My mother was a Fulbright scholar. My sister was a Fulbright scholar. We traveled as kids a lot around the world. My mother wanted to expand our consciousness beyond New Orleans. And there are other places I've been that have been very welcoming. South Africa was very welcoming. I went there in 2018 and 2019. Australia, I did a study abroad when I was in law school for a summer, for 2 months in Australia, in Sydney. Very welcoming, very friendly. It was different. Italy. We did our honeymoon in Italy and then did our 5th anniversary wedding trip to Italy. Those 3 countries stand out as among the most welcoming countries we've been to. Portugal was even above that. And what I mean by that is that there was always a caveat. So in South Africa, in Cape Town, my wife and daughter were followed around a drugstore, a pharmacy, by a Black security guard. And until they started talking to the clerk and they heard an English, I guess an American version of an English accent, then he stopped. Okay. In Australia, I didn't have any racist incidents, but there was always a sense of the fact that I was sort of exotic and the treatment of a Black American as being exotic. Italy was the closest. Italy was warm, but not as warm as Portugal was. And so we're living in an era right now in the United States where getting stopped by the police, if you're an African-American man, is a matter of life and death. I was stopped by the police about a year ago in my car, speeding. Not proud of that, but I drive an Audi. There was a BMW next to me that wanted to cut me off on a merge, and I had to show that BMW who was king. And the cop then stops me. And the first thing I thought about when I got stopped was, did we finish doing our will? Because this could turn south for no other reason. It was a perfectly wonderful, by the book, kind and nice cop. Shout out to Montgomery County Police in Maryland. He was nice and saw my nervousness and tried to calm me down and let me go with a warning. And I kind of deserved a ticket on that one. So there is a general level of intensity about race issues in the United States. And if you spent most of your life in one place, like I have, you start to think, well, the world must be like this. Every place is like this. I'm always going to be considered a Black man and a threat. And there are certain social conventions that you get used to in the United States. You ask another Black man, they'll tell you, I'm very conscious of my physical space around white people, particularly white women. I find myself, yesterday I was somewhere and I was in a grocery store and I was trying to get to the same shelf as a white woman. And I walked around the area that was the opposite side of her purse because I didn't want her to think, oh, I'm reaching for this, can of diced tomatoes. And I'm really trying to get to your purse, right? And I'm 51. I have gray hair, as you can obviously see. But you are hyper conscious of that in the United States. And so I brought that a little bit with me to Portugal because it's a survival instinct. I walked home at 1 a.m, many nights, and there was women in front of me, Portuguese women in front of me that knew behind me is a Black man or a dark brown man or whatever you want to call it, and didn't flinch, didn't seem nervous. I have been in New Jersey on commuter trains with the same people that I get on the train in Manhattan in a suit. I get off the train in New Jersey to one of the most affluent suburbs in the country, Montclair, New Jersey. The same woman that sees me on the train is walking in front of me and moves away from me, like literally crosses the street twice to avoid me walking behind her. She's seen me get on the train in Manhattan with $1,000 suit on, but still moves away. So this is a real reality. And I just found that I think it's the absence of guns in the culture and the absence of just the sort of systemic racism and the constant barrage of images and media that you have in the United States, that renders me just a random person. Maybe I look African American, maybe I'm Brazilian, maybe I'm, who knows, but I'm not seen as a threat. And that happened with women. It happened with men. It happened with police officers. I walked home with my buddy Jeffrey after a night of partying at shout out to Oui Monsieur by Guillaume, a lounge we went to. We're walking home from there at 2 a.m. and we stopped some cops to get directions. I don't really speak Portuguese. It's 2 a.m. Maybe he deduces that I've been drinking, and completely polite. Oh, go that way, go that way, go that way. Not a shred of hostility. Now, maybe I just got the good lot of the Portuguese people, but not after 8 weeks. Not after 8 weeks in Lisbon, in Coimbra, in Porto, in the Algarve, in small situations with people. I was at Sandro, the upscale store on Avenida Liberdade. I asked for a particular item of clothing. The woman left me in the store and went back to the storeroom. I was in there by myself. That would never have happened in the United States. You got to leave an African-American patron in the store while you check inventory in the stock room, because the idea is that you're going to steal something. And so I was just deeply moved by what didn't happen. Yes, there were amazing acts of kindness, but I was moved by how many things didn't happen to me during that trip.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm from South Africa. I was a kid. I was 12 when all of the changes, when we moved from apartheid to freedom, when Nelson Mandela was released. So this is incredibly important to me, because I remember the first black kid coming to our school, and I made friends with him immediately, because I was like, you can't sit here alone eating lunch. And so this is really, really important. And Portugal's not perfect. There are issues. We do have issues, but it's important for me. And it's a beautiful thing that people feel this way. And I think there's a lot of history involved in this. I don't know if you saw, I don't know if you guys saw on the news with the George Floyd thing, if you saw the protests in Portugal.
Yep, I did.
I mean, it was phenomenal. I was blown away at the amount of people, everybody who protested against what happened to him. And I think there is just a genuine sense of, humans are humans, everybody's everybody, love is love, and we accept people for who they are. And it's something that I'm hearing time and time again from people in Portugal, that this is something that happens here.
Yeah. As I mentioned before the podcast recording, I got to know a lot of African-American women who had moved to Portugal. And they gave me all the wonderful indications about, Portuguese life, and some of the practical things about, getting a phone card and where to live and that kind of thing. But I said to my wife, I said, I want to talk to African-American men who live over there, because it's a different lived experience. And so we started these Zoom calls during COVID. The brothers talked Portugal. And it was 6 African-American men. We got to know each other. We're all good friends now. Some of us very close. And there was one gentleman named Chris Campbell, who is a lawyer in Portugal. He's married to a Portuguese woman. He's African-American. He's from South Carolina. And he said one story. He said, we were like, so what is it like for, how's it going to feel if I'm over there? Do we get followed? Is there racial profiling? He said, you can't see me on this Zoom, but I'm 6'3" and I'm about 250 pounds. And I've never felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Any neighborhood, what are you doing here? Any store, I've never felt that. And I've traveled all over Europe, and I felt in other parts of Europe, but I've never felt that in Portugal. He said, so take that with a grain of salt. And we took that to heart. And I've got a chance to know Chris, and we become good friends. And that is the perspective every Black man I know has had there. Now, we're all American, right? So we're not from Mozambique. We're not for any of the African colonies, and I understand that may be a different lived experience. But the reality is, you can have a different lived experience as a Black man in other parts of the world. It is not a given that you will be treated inclusively and feel like you belong as an African American in other parts of the world. So it stood out in a very, very pronounced way at a time in America where these issues are at a fever pitch.
Yeah. Okay. That brings us perfectly into point number 3. Inclusion is realized when it's felt, not as some abstract notion. Portugal is one of the most welcoming places I've ever been. I felt included in family-owned taskas, fine dining. I love the fact that you use taskas. It's great. Fine dining establishments and upscale stores, and I never felt rushed to leave. Though I would have understood I was never slighted or demeaned for speaking in my really limited Portuguese. For every day of 60 days, I felt welcomed.
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples. I was at the Majestic Cafe in Porto, and I was eating alone. I had lunch and coffee, and the waiter treated me, and I think he treated everybody like this, but he didn't treat me unlike this, is the point. He treated me like I was like a member of some royal family. I mean, the genuflection, the drama with which he set the table and took away, and do you need anything else? Can I help you? He came around at exactly the right amount of time without hovering, but without leaving me sort of alone. And I asked him, I said, sir, is this the way you treat everybody? This is like the most amazing customer service I've ever experienced. He's like, yes, that is what we're famous for here at the cafe is our service and the food as well. So I was like, okay, well, that's one time. I went to this place. That's kind of their thing. Later in Porto, I go by a newsboy cap at this artisanal sort of store that's selling these handmade caps. And there's an elderly woman there, and the cap was, I think, 30 euros. And I didn't have 30 euros. I had like 20. She said, it's okay. Take the cap. I mean, it's all been wrapped up now in the bag. She said, take the cap and come back with the money later. What? Excuse me, ma'am? Hello? Yeah. It's 2021. You don't tell somebody come back with the money. It wasn't like it was like $2. It was 30 euros, right? I love that cap, by the way, now. It's so special to me now because of that situation. I had another situation at a cafe where I asked the woman at the cafe, I guess who owned the cafe, I said, do you have any caps for these cappuccinos? I have to walk 2 blocks. By the time I get 2 blocks, they're going to spill. And she said, no, I don't have caps. Again, through my butchered Portuguese and Google Translate and whatnot. And she says, hold on. And she goes to the back. She brings out a napkin. She covers the coffee in a napkin. She puts a rubber band around the napkin and then takes a stirrer and pokes it through the top of both of them and says, now, here, go. And I was like, who does that? Who does that? Cafes in America? I'd be like, no, sorry. Next, what are you having? This woman stopped and literally put rubber bands and napkins around my coffee. And so this happened everywhere we went. Either it was extraordinarily kind people and or great service, or it's what we call in Louisiana, lagniappe, the something extra. People just gave you something extra as part of the deal. And it didn't matter where we were. Like I said, Ramiro's to a Tasca. I had a Bifana at a store I'm trying to find. It's near this vintage clothing store I went to. And I was walking back out and I went to the store. And I told the waiter, I said, in Louisiana, when you have a good meal that really blows you away, there's an expression we use. We say, somebody put their big toe in the pot. It's so good. And I said, I want to talk to the chef. He said, come here, talk to the chef, tell him that. And so I said, sir, I don't know what's going on, but somebody put their big toe in this food. And it was the best bifana I've ever had in my life. One of the best sandwiches I've had in my life. And it was that kind of interplay with people, no pretense, wonderful, friendly, humble service. And I found that amazing in a culture that is not a tipping culture. And coming back to the United States where you have the tip, and I'm like, what did you do? You wrapped up my sushi. You didn't really do anything. You just handed it to me, and I got to tip you. You asked me to tip you 15%. I mean, I get the economics of wait staff and restaurants and why it's important, but I found an amazing consistency in every city, in establishments, casual and upscale, retail and eating establishments. It's as if everybody went to the same customer service school or something. And it got to the point where I was like on a mission to find the rude Portuguese server. I was like, I'm going to find somebody. No, they can't all be this way. They can't all be this way. I mean, I wasn't acting rude to try to elicit it, but in eight weeks, it never happened. Like it never happened. And I thought, this is now an issue of culture. This is not training. This is sort of in the culture of this community, and it's a beautiful thing.
I mean, Rory, I'm a blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin. I'm a product of privilege to a certain degree. I don't understand how important this factor of inclusion is. Because I've maybe in 2 or 3 times in my life been somewhere where I didn't feel included because of how I looked. How important was this? Can you describe how that felt to you, of just being able to just sit and be at a place and just breathe without having that pressure and that stress that you've explained about being in the States?
It means everything. It means everything. At the same time that I'm traveling to Portugal, my mother is completing the final touches on a 35-year project to look at our genealogy. And what we found that was sort of fascinating is a very deep historical line in the Native American community that we thought might be there in some parts, but it is a dominant thread through our genealogy. There is European ancestry on the French side. My name is Verrett, like a lot of people from Louisiana, but there's also a very pronounced Native American strain, more so than an African thread, to be honest. I've identified as African American and Black. I am Black. That's a cultural sort of choice, but turns out there's a lot of Native American. So my point is that my roots in America, on the American continent, go deep, go back. My mother traced us back to the 1590s. We are not new to this country. Yet and still, you can be treated as if you don't belong, right? So my ancestors are Native American, and I've been treated by people whose ancestry undoubtedly does not go back that far, and I've been treated less than. I was taking an executive to lunch. Well, she took me to lunch at her private dining club in Atlanta. And after the lunch, she's a white woman. We come downstairs, we shake hands, and I go to my car. And I drove at the time a Prius. And I get in my car. I am in a $1,000 Italian suit, Ferragamo tie, Gucci loafers, the whole bit. I'm in my car, and a white valet comes running up to my car whose keys have been handed to me by another valet, by the way, and comes banging on my door and says, "Get out of this car, you've stolen this car." I'm like, "Excuse me," I thought it was kind of a prank. And he kept saying, "Get out of this car." He's like, "Security, this guy is stealing this car." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so I have a few choice words with him, go call the manager. The manager comes down and fires him on the spot. He's like, "Why am I getting fired?" I was like, why did you think I stole my car? He's like, didn't have an answer. I was like, because you think somebody like me doesn't drive a car like that, right? A Black man doesn't drive a Prius. I said, by the way, if I'm gonna steal a car, I'm not gonna steal the Prius with the Obama sticker. I'm gonna steal the BMW over there with the McCain sticker on it, right? I could tell you an example of walking home from the movies, and I'm jogging home because it's 1 a.m. and I live in a bad neighborhood in 1990s DC, and I'm in a Harvard Law sweatshirt, and 6 cops stop me, 3 with guns out, gun to my head. I'm on the roof of the car because they suspect me of being some Hispanic serial killer. And after they take my ID out of my pocket and realize I'm a lawyer for a member of Congress and not a Capitol Hill serial killer. I said, why did you stop me? They said, well, we thought you were the serial killer. I said, did he go to law school? Right? Because I got this big old law school shirt on. So I can give you countless examples of that, of times when I had been accused of doing something criminal when I was just walking down the street or coming home from the movies or just having lunch at a private club with another executive. So that is the reality I come from. And then to come to a country where I am a foreigner, right? The minute I talk, you do not hear the Portuguese language coming out of my mouth, right? I am not, I'm medium brown skin. I maybe, I don't know, look black or Brazilian or something. Maybe I don't look Portuguese, but I'm clearly not, I'm a foreigner. And for people to sort of welcome and treat me that way was psychologically so uplifting at this precise moment I'm living my life in the United States that it caused us to make some very important moves related to Portugal. For instance, our firm is expanding to Europe. We're going to open up an office very likely in Portugal next year in Lisbon. We are going to be going to Portugal probably once a year for the foreseeable future. It was transformational. I had become this evangelist for Portugal to a lot of friends. There are a lot of people who they read my post on Facebook or the one on LinkedIn, and they're emailing me, texting me, hitting me up on instant messenger. I want to learn more about Portugal. You've inspired me. And everyone who's gone has had the same experience. So I think it's what Portugal is. I think it's also what Portugal is not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for you, it's quite interesting because I think for you to try to explain to a Portuguese person the kind of circumstances that you live through, they won't get it because it's so foreign. It's the same way for me as a South African, to try to explain to them how we live in fear because of crime in a place like Johannesburg. They don't get it because they've never had to. And thank goodness they've never had to, because it's not a way to live, the way that you're living, the way that I've had to live before, other South Africans. So it's an amazing thing. And I'm really glad that you've had that experience and that you feel like it's a place that you welcome because you are. So please keep coming back. Please keep coming back. Number 4. It felt great to be part of a community united against COVID-19. As of this post, 85% of Portugal has been vaccinated. There were no big protests about the vaccine or government-sanctioned social restrictions. COVID-19 was not politicized, and almost everyone I saw obliged with mask wearing and other restrictions. As a result, life in Portugal is returning to its pre-pandemic state. Okay, we've got a little thing called Omicron going on, so we have to be aware of that. But yeah, I love this.
Yeah, so we did not find in any way for our 2 months there that COVID hampered our style of travel. Now, granted, it was summer. Lisbon and most of Portugal, al fresco dining. Everything's outside. It's beautiful waterfront in most of the country. So we were outside. We're not inside a lot. I did not go. I think I went to 2 inside establishments, but you didn't have to. Even during Christmas, where we went for a week, we ate outside. It was a little rainy, but you could still eat outside. So we found that our hypervigilance, and we are hyper vigilant about COVID, protection. My wife, shout out to my wife, who really started early getting us registered for vaccines and the boosters and just making sure we were prepared in our house and our comings and goings and whatnot. She's done a great job. And so if you're hyper vigilant on your own, and then the country has sensible protocols and laws and procedures, you can enjoy your life, right? I didn't think like, man, we went to Portugal for 2 months. What a waste of time that was. It wasn't. We went to see everything. I mean, the only thing we didn't see was the bookstore in Porto that I guess J.K. Rowling's. Yeah.
Because you can never get in there.
Right. Twice. The line was too long. It wasn't like COVID was a problem, but the line was too long. So we were there 2 months. We tested negative the entire time. We tested ourselves multiple times. Even in Lisbon over Christmas, when I was leaving, I was getting some tests, and the pharmacia representative, how many do you need? I said, I don't know, 6. He's like, okay, here you go. Right, in America, you can't get 6 home tests anywhere. So we found that refreshing, that it wasn't politicized. I'm sure there are pockets of Portugal that have an issue with it, like there are in every country. But it seems like even in Europe, that's the UK and France, they're having protests. Eastern Europe is having protests, but not so much in Portugal. I just think, again, these are sensible people. These are not. This is not. I love the fact that Portugal had a general that really galvanized the public around protecting themselves against COVID, and said it's us versus COVID. It's not pro-vax versus anti-vax. And that's such a smart way of approaching it. And, no surprise that you guys have such a, I guess 90% now vaccination rate. And that's higher than a lot of American state, almost every American state right now.
Okay. Number 5. I love this. Time is more important than money. While I'm enjoying the commercial success of our firm, I'm most interested in redeeming it for the privilege of controlling how I spend my time. Money has its place, but I mostly want more interesting experiences with my family and friends. Rory, that's so incredibly Portuguese. So, we need to think about some citizenship here, because this is what they do here. It's just, let's work so that we can spend time. Work so that, because like you said at the beginning, the Portuguese work hard. They work really hard. I know, I work with Portuguese people. They work really hard. They diligent, they loyal, they are not lazy at all. Mm-hmm. But there's a balance. What am I going to do with my time? And there's that balance that you spoke about at the beginning, where, well, I'm working so that I can have that time with family, friends, and doing the things that they seem unimportant, but they are the most important things. Having good food, spending time in beautiful places, and enjoying life.
Yeah. So I found having that experience juxtaposed against the American experience to be also quite profound. That basically in America, the transaction is, I think in the economy is, unlike a lot of places in the world, you can get stratospherically wealthy in America. You can become a billionaire. I mean, not everybody, but you can become a millionaire. Like it's almost like a casino. You can make a lot of money in America, but what do you redeem that for? You either redeem that for the excuse me, the small amount of time you have to enjoy it. You can have a hyper luxury experience, right? So your 2-week vacation that you have from grinding your way to get to that millionaire status, you can stay in the Ritz-Carlton in Miami, or go to New York, or go to Vegas, and it's a luxe experience. But that is not available to the average middle class worker. The average middle class worker has to think about tuition, which, if you want to send your child to a private college in America right now, that's going to cost you $300,000. Okay. You do not have adequate health care coverage. If you have a catastrophic illness through no fault of your own, you could go bankrupt. So there's this constant pressure on you for debt and sort of bankruptcy that looms out there. And they say the average American is a couple of paychecks away from poverty, right? We're living check to check. And so if you make it beyond that, then you're making it to a scenario where, but I don't get more time. I just get a better luxury experience with the time that I have. Whereas I think in much of Europe, and certainly in Portugal, there's a sense of, what if we could provide you a safety net so that an illness does not create bankruptcy? What if college was not catastrophically, going to break your budget by having you borrow $300,000? I have friends in the United States that have $500,000 in student loans. $500,000 they have to pay back in student loans. Okay, and then what if I could also provide for you an economy where you could have the freedom to do what you want? Now, I know critics because I read it on LinkedIn and Facebook, critics of the Portuguese economy will say, yes, but we don't have the ability to control the upside of our income, that wages and salaries are so compressed in Portugal. But I think the Portuguese economic future is going to be built around attracting global digital nomads and moving toward a tech economy, an entrepreneurial economy, where you can control the upside with some risk. You can get the reward of taking that risk. And I think you're going to find in the next 20 to 30 years, this is my prediction, Portugal is going to wind up being like Singapore. It's going to wind up being this global hotbed of innovation where younger people or people coming out of a second or third career decide, I'm going to, sort of ply my way as an entrepreneur in Portugal because I have lower cost of living, lower, reasonably, low taxes with the different visa schemes and whatnot. I've got access to major markets. Asia is closer. Europe is obviously closer. Africa is closer. North America is kind of the center of the world in some ways. And so I think you're going to find a lot of people taking that formula because you can have the upside, but have a much more comfortable lifestyle.
Yep.
I mean, there's evidence in the US that your happiness does not go up beyond $75,000 in the United States. Your happiness or joy factor psychologically stops once you hit $75,000. And so I found with our own business, kind of this emotional release. Like, I don't need to make that much money. I don't even need to make as much money as we're going to make to enjoy my life, because there's such an amazing balance in your life in Portugal. Last thing I'll say, we were at this cafe on the Ribeira, right? Not far from Praça do Comércio. And it was one of the cafes where you can sit in the lounge chairs, and there was a DJ playing. And we were all sort of like, my wife and I looking at each other like, this is really nice. This is really nice. And my wife said, what are we going to do here, though? I mean, what are we going to do here? And it was the second hour of our time at this cafe. My daughter was taking a nap. We were on a second glass of sangria. The DJ's playing. It's a spectacular day. The boats are coming in the harbor. And I said, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Sit and drink sangria and watch sailboats come in. That's a thing. That's a thing. And so I just learned how to single task a little bit more in Portugal, stay in the present, and appreciate the thing that I'm doing. Because, of course, in Portugal, the things are so spectacularly awesome. The visual is so awesome. Taking a boat out in the Algarve was awesome. Taking a wine tour in the Douro Valley was its own awesome thing. Sitting by the bank of the river in the Douro River at the Ribeira, in Porto was its own thing. So I just found that it's teaching me to be a single track lifestyle person and not a multitask kind of person, and to just to calibrate how much I need to sort of have joy in my life. And it turns out it's not that much.
Amazing. Yeah, another thing there, when you talk about being able to live here, if you get ill or one of your loved ones get ill, you don't have to mortgage your house. Your medical is, it's amazing. Where to next? Where else in Portugal do you want to visit, Rory?
Well, my wife and I are big wine lovers, so I want to do more of the Alentejo and more of the Douro Valley.
Yes.
And I also, we just dipped our toe in the water in the Algarve, so there are a bunch of other cities I want to see down there. I still feel like I've only scratched the surface of Porto by 2 weekend trips there. And every time I go to Lisbon, and when we come back, every single time I'm like, we should have gone to this place. Why didn't we go to that place? Well, we had a really busy schedule, but we couldn't fit in all the great restaurants, in particular the restaurants. I think that is where Portugal punches way above its class. The food and wine scene in in Portugal is world class, and it's only just getting even better. And newsflash, it's affordable. I went to Paris for business and for Thanksgiving. Paris, love you. It's the land of the €8 cappuccino. Okay, and I went to a pastelaria with 2 other people. We all had cappuccinos. We all had pastries. We brought pastries home. It was €12. Yeah. So I just think bang for the buck. All these Michelin star restaurants, the areas in Parc de Nassau, all those restaurants, and how affordable that is. It's almost like cartoonishly cheap. I mean, really. I went to a restaurant in Porto called Piccolo Camafu. If you're ever up there, Angela Sellers is a Black American who's in a partnership with a Portuguese entrepreneur, and they run this Italian restaurant. And 4 of us ate there: appetizer, entree, dessert, and a bottle of wine. It was €78. I mean, I wanted to give her $200. I wanted to give her €200. Like, that was worth €200. So it's I don't know how long it's going to stay that way, because a lot of people are looking at Portugal as a place to retire or to work as a digital nomad. But for right now, man, it is the Armani suit on sale.
Yeah, we need to stop talking about it. Otherwise, more people are going to go. Yeah,
go to Uruguay. Go to
Listen,
Canada.
Let me know when you're next here, and lunch is on me. I'd love to meet you in person.
Absolutely. Cool. And thank you for doing a wonderful podcast. I've listened to many of your shows. You do such an elegant and insightful dive into all facets of Portuguese life. It's really helped me understand why Portugal is so special and deserves to be explored.
Awesome. Thank you, Rory. Rory, as you know, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
I think you can come to love Portugal by process of elimination, that there's a lot of things not happening in Portugal that are bedeviling other parts of the world. I think you could come to Portugal if you're already in Europe, or if you're already considering a culture and a community near water with a kind of cosmopolitan, Mediterranean-like atmosphere. But I think Portugal stands on its own to pull you in to its unique, humble, beautiful, simple, yet elegant charms. And it's one of the few places that stays with you. I came home listening to Portuguese music. I bought Portuguese cookbooks. I had Portuguese history books. Portugal has changed my life. So if you want a place that will reorient your senses and stimulate your mind about its culture and enlarge the capacity of your soul to experience the beauty of the world, go to Portugal, and go soon.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Rory, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dylan.
And I'm going to let you call it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Rory, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to the simple life.